The best, biggest radishes in the world. As the stars twinkled in the sky, 4 excited bunnies clambered into their beds. Close your eyes tight, whispered Mrs. Rabbit. Father Christmas only comes when every little bunny is fast asleep.
You may see a stranger. You may see a stranger across a crowded room, and somehow you know even then, that somewhere you'll see her again and again. Some enchanted evening, someone may be laughing. You may hear her laughing across a crowded room, and night after night, as strange as it seems, the sound of her laughter will sing in your dreams. Who can explain it? Who can tell you why? Fools give you reasons, wise men never try. Some enchanted evening, when you find your true love, when you feel her call you across a crowded room, then fly to her side and make her your own. For all through your life you may dream alone. Once you have found her, never let her go. Once you have found her, never let her.
I like potatoes in my tummy. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and the hour of our death. Francis became an officer and then started something that is really significantly special and important for the military.
Yeah, it's become a massive part of our lives, and I think it does impact beyond. So he always in his basic training, when he was training to be a soldier, he had asked to be able to go to mass, and he had been told by the padre that was there at the time, oh no, you don't need mass, you can just come to our service, it'll be fine. Because he's a soldier, he's expected to just go along with it. Because he's Francis, he didn't. But he had always, from that point forward, had in his mind, wouldn't it be good to have an organisation that I could link in with that would be, you know, fellow Catholics, because it's the military life is really suited to Catholic men particularly, if you're orientated correctly. Like, it's all of the moral courage and suffering and, you know, duty and working hard and all of these things. Like, it can build virtue really strongly.
Yeah.
And the dignity of people and the importance of life and the importance of death and, you know, how they all link together. Like, it's really, really well suited. But also it could be really corrosive to your faith. because it's lots of men living together. You know, all of the pitfalls that usually come with that. There's, you know, you're away from family, you're away from the sacraments, like it's also hard.
You can see a big gap.
There's a gap because the Catholic chaplains, they exist and they're great when they're where they are, but they're only in small pockets of the country. There aren't very many of them. So you can't necessarily find one. And because of the duties you're on, you can't necessarily get to Mass. You're moved around all the time. There's not a parish community. We know how important community is. So he'd always had in his mind, wouldn't it be great if there was a community of Catholics, like at least lay Catholics that I can pray with and that we can... And he tried, when he was in the troops as a soldier, he started to build up his own little community because they were all... because the war was still on at that point and they thought they were going. So they were taking it really seriously. They're taking the training really seriously. They were taking the state of their lives really seriously. You know, they thought they could be dead within 6 months. So they were very much... Ozzy, you need to tell us about God. You need to tell us what to do. You need to tell me what do I do to pray? How do I do it? All of this stuff. Like they were really receptive and they were really keen. And because he was one of them, he could chat to them about it and it was great. And I ended up sending him through a load of stuff that they'd asked for. Like they wanted rosaries and they wanted crucifixes. They wanted all the stuff. They wanted miraculous medals. They were really keen and they had friends who were on the front lines that they were praying for. Like it was really real for them in a way that it's like I was brought up in such a gentle middle class kind of way, and like the tangibility of life and death, it's not there.
It's so
everything's so kind of nice and insubstantial, whereas these guys were like, they're from inner city Liverpool and they've never seen a horse before, and they're so they're so like everything is real. It's much more real and they care a lot more. So then if you give them something that is truth, it's so much stronger.
Is Genevieve your friend?
No.
She's doing this thing, she disagrees with people at the moment.
Now he's an officer. He can't talk to people like that on a level. He can't talk to the soldiers on a level. They can't come to him and be like, oh, what's God then? In the same way, because he's not, like, then it's inappropriate because he's in a position of power over them. Like, that's not a thing that he can really do. But what he can do is he can create a community where these people can talk to each other. So that's what he and his friends set up. It's the Catholic Military Association, which has now become a massive part of our lives because there's so much admin. Who knew? So it's now a national charity with international sister groups. There's a sister group in the USA, there's a sister group in Canada, there's one being set up in Australia. It's really cool. Wow. And it's lay Catholics basically just trying to live well. And it sounds pretty lame on a secular level, but on a spiritual level, you're encouraging people to pray, people who haven't necessarily prayed for years, or people who are like, you know, they're going through a rough time at home and, you know, their wife is off somewhere else and it's really rough, but they just need this lifeline. And it's there. And it's people grasping to get life into some sort of perspective and to find some meaning in the suffering that they're going through and to find a reason to continue. So one of the things that we've managed to do is in the process of doing things like explaining to the MOD what a religious obligation is, because that's not something that was really understood before. Because although Christianity is part of the religion of this country, it's mostly Anglicanism and there aren't any obligations in the same way. So
so each individual might have gone, but now there's this big organisation.
Yeah, there just wasn't the understanding that on a Sunday you go to Mass. If you can enshrine it in the rules of the organisation, then soldiers can point to it and say, look, in this paragraph here, it says we can go. You need to let me go if I'm not on an essential duty. And then the commanders can be like, okay, off you go then. You know, like that.
Rather than just somebody coming and them, you know,
and being like, oh, you just want a morning off. A lot of soldiers come through via Instagram and they're like, oh, this is interesting. They have a little chat in the DMs and then they might join and they're like, oh, maybe I'll start taking my faith more seriously. Like it brings people through. It's given
permission.
It gives you permission to know that it's not just you thinking that maybe this might be a good idea.
And that you need to go to Mass on Sunday, but you kind of not got...
Well, you know, go to confession sometime in your life.
And holy days of obligation.
Yeah.
I know it's a Monday, but it's the 6th of January. And
and also, we just need to go now.
Because we pray for a soldier.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the other thing that a lot of people do, which is fab, is every time somebody joins the association, they can choose to have their name known or not known, just their first name, known or not known, by their individual prayer supporter. So there's people sign up to be prayer supporters, and they can pray for, they're given 5 soldiers to pray for. Soldiers, sailors, airmen, MOD civil servants. It's across the services. And that just lets people know that there's someone out there praying for them.
And what a powerful thing, like people are then praying for them.
Yeah, it's really special. And it makes a genuine, tangible difference in people's lives. Like they say so. It's really special.
And I love that your quote, that it kind of comes down to, be who God meant you to be and you'll set the world on fire.
Yeah, because
St. Catherine of Siena.
In secular terms, you're sort of saying, what are you actually doing? You're not feeding the hungry, and you're not clothing anyone, you're not saving any lives, all of this stuff. It's quite mundane. But also, if you're giving people the tools to be who God wants them to be, they will do those things. They'll go off and they'll do that. And that's really special.
Yes.
Do you want to come through?
Yeah, I'll come
get
through.
you some...
We've got, in fact, I'm going to leave my shoes on for a minute because I want to get some. Do you have, what a gorgeous picture!
That was my dad's. Yeah.
That was your dad's?
He did it. Someone paid him using it. So it was in my house. It was in my bedroom when I was growing up.
And then that's the...
And then it happens to be the regiment I joined. Yeah. So it's fun how it comes full circle.
Wow. Do you think it's subliminal messaging to you? Yeah. I went to a Darren Brown show once and there was like subliminal messaging the whole time, and then we all answered the same questions at the end. Like your eyes. And he like showed you around the stage of the things that he'd been like planting in your mind the whole time. And meanwhile, the family's growing. You had a little Louis Richard. And you know, what is common for lots of families, there's a miscarriage, and I'm sorry. You know, it's painful. Oh, gorgeous.
Yeah,
boy.
that was...
We're going to come on to you.
Hello, you.
And miscarriages are really painful.
Just because we hadn't sort of expected it.
Yeah.
I know, my love, I know.
And then you hear, and then you get into, you know, you hear people are having miscarriages, and it's so sad, and it can be really dark and difficult, emotional.
Francis, he's attached to my mic and he's pulled the tea over.
Sorry.
Can you just...
So gently. Sorry.
Thanks.
Do you look back and think, it's almost like you've been geared up for the next level of cross?
I always...
Because
it's like a recurring joke, was like each birth, each time we do it, it's something more.
You just think,
something more dramatic.
This will be
something harder.
A therapy baby.
Each time. Louis and Francis was away for 6 months. I don't even know where he was. He went to Kuwait or something. He was all over the place. So he was away again. So we had the three then, and he was away. I know.
So it doesn't make a noise in your hand.
I know. But that was, like, it was pretty chill. I can't really remember those 2 years, so I'm going to go with they were chill. Yeah, the miscarriage was just before Louis, but we got there. But then we had Louis, and Louis is just little sunshine. He's fab. He's I know.
He didn't want to go outside earlier because actually it's too cold.
Oh,
There's Henry outside with no shoes on.
With no shoes on.
On the
standard.
Whatever of December.
Standard. Yeah, and then we decided that obviously that was too simple, so then we thought we would move to Brunei, which is the other side of the world.
And then how far in advance did you know about going to Brunei?
That was really funny. We were supposed to know a lot further in advance. We lived on a street with other military families. Some of them were in the Navy, and I was talking to the naval chap about it. And I said, we've got the dates. It's in 4 months. And he was like, no, they're not allowed to do that. It can't be. It must be a year and 4 months. I'm like, no. No, it's 4 months. So we only knew about it 4 months in advance. I know, by which time I was quite pregnant. So we had packing up for an international house move and giving birth
to your
all at
first
the same time.
girl.
My first girl, which was lovely. But they'd taken, because it takes 8 weeks to ship stuff from the UK to Brunei, they'd taken all of our furniture. We hadn't even had it officially confirmed that we were going yet, but they'd taken our furniture. So we gave birth at home in a house with no furniture in. Like, okay, there were a few bare bits, but it was like most of our stuff had gone. We were lighting things with fairy lights because all of our lamps had gone, like all of our nice stuff had just left. And we had to tell the midwives, look, we don't normally live like this, please don't call social services, this is not standard for us. So she was born 3 weeks before we left, in the middle of COVID lockdown. So we couldn't see anybody.
And that's so you were pregnant when you found out that you were going?
Yeah. So I was already pregnant when we found out we were going.
And due to be having the baby around that time.
Yeah, we were like, oh, this has not worked out quite the way we thought it might, but fine. Yeah, so it was COVID lockdown, so we couldn't see anybody. We didn't have family around because they weren't allowed to be around. So my sister came, which was amazing. She bubbled with us.
Super midwife
Came to be there for the birth, which was very helpful because I had Genevieve at home, and she was quick. All of my births have been quick, apart from this one. But she was quick, so she was quicker than the midwives. So I was very glad to have my sister there as backup.
Yeah. And then you went on to Brunei.
We flew across the world to Brunei, which was very cool.
With a 3-week-old baby.
With a 3-week-old baby.
And also get the passport really quick.
Oh yeah, no, it was crazy because the passport office was closed because it was COVID. So then we had to write emails to these government departments being like, please let us have a passport. We have a reason. We're not just travelling. So it was a whole drama.
How long were you there in total?
We were there 2 years. I know. And I think it took a good 6 to 9 months to really get over the culture shock of living somewhere so completely different, because it's the other side of the world. It's in a tropical rainforest. So we had jungle overhanging our back garden. We had monkeys on our roof. We were fully in the tropics.
Wow.
Snakes, crocodiles, all of the, deadly animals.
And France's work at this point was looking more stable in terms of work.
So the funny thing was, being halfway across the world was actually much better for family stability because he was already deployed. He wasn't allowed to be deployed from his deployment. Okay. So we were deployed with him, which meant he came home every night, which was amazing. So he had 2 years where he'd never left, which was really cool. So that was amazing from that point of view. And
so you thought, that's it, we made it.
Yeah, we did it. We just did it on the other side of the
world. We've got
world.
through all our crosses, we're going to be able to, deal with it all now.
Yeah, he was working for the Sultan's army, so he was on loan service. So he was in Brunei uniform with the crescent moon because it's a Sharia law country.
And so meanwhile, you then were blessed with another baby.
Yeah. So so we then got pregnant sort of a year in to Brunei, and we were a bit like, not sure if we would have necessarily chosen to give birth here because it's such a different culture, it's such a different standard of medical care, such different everything, and obviously family are a very long way away, all of that sort of stuff. You're not allowed to have home births. Everything is very medicalised. It's very prescriptive. So we're like, this is going to be very different, but we'll go with it. And then we got to 18 weeks, and then Florence came a lot earlier than we wanted her to. So she was born at 18 weeks, and we had her at home. So Francis was able to catch her. We didn't know she was going to be a girl before she was born, so Francis caught her, and he held her and he said, oh, it's a girl. So we baptised her very quickly because we thought she was only going to live for a few minutes, but she actually lived for a lot longer than we expected her to. So she was with us for a good while. So he caught her and he held her and he talked to her with such love, and obviously it was intensely emotional, and it was so fraught because she wasn't supposed to be being born, and it was very challenging situation. I'd woken him up sort of half an hour before and said, I think it's happening. so he'd gone from being asleep to catching the baby, and he'd in that time he'd moved from being completely, we were obviously trying to prevent it from happening. We had a couple of days run up. We were trying everything we could to stop the contractions. It wasn't working. So then I said, no, this is it, it's happening. So he switched from that to being fully supportive birth partner, and then catching her, and he talked to her with such love, and he had her, and he was talking to her. He wasn't just telling me about her, he was talking to her, and he was welcoming her to the world, and he baptized her, Florence Rose, and then he gave her to me, and he went to get the other children so they could meet her. So then they held her too, if they wanted to. Some of them wanted to, some of them didn't. They held her too, and then so the whole of her life had her siblings praying the rosary with her.
Wow.
And it was actually a moment of incredible beauty in amongst an absolutely hellish week. It was an awful week. But her life was like a still point amid everything horrible that happened all around it. Her life was just absolutely luminous, and she gave us there was such peace. It was it was beautiful. It was the joy with the trials, like you say. She was there, and she was so strong. I wasn't expecting her to be so strong. She was like pushing, and she was kicking, and she was so breathing. She wasn't just lying there. She was really present, and she was really like a little fighter.
And had you got wrapped her in a little blanket or something, or how did you do it?
We didn't expect her to survive, because like what we'd read is that she would only be alive for a couple of minutes. So our priority is like baptize her quick, and we didn't have anything. We didn't have anything there, like any stuff. So we just had her, like, it's a warm country. It was all warm. We had her in our hands, and she just gradually faded, and then we had to deal with everything from there. We got her repatriated to the UK, and we had the most beautiful funeral for her. And her grave is in Cardiff, so we're going to go and visit her this Christmas. But she's been a really present member of our family. The children talk about her quite a lot, like in a positive way. They chose her coffin, and they made her little blankets and things. So they're really involved, and she's been a real blessing in our family. She's really given us a lot of peace in a really complicated kind of way.
And that was her life, and it was so dignified.
She was just so there, and like I'd felt her, it hadn't been the easiest pregnancy, because it wasn't completely it wasn't the timing that I'd had in my head. And she was given to us as this gift, and it had taken me a while to get my head to the point where I was like, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to be good. And I'd really committed to it, and then she was gone, and it was really hard, but it was also really beautiful, because she's still there, she was fully baptized, and she was fully, like, she's our first saint.
God, that is amazing.
Which is amazing, and like Francis talks about it as like she's the first one that we've got across the line. Like, we can pray for the rest of them. She's the one that we can tick her off. Yeah.
Patron of the Catholic Military Association.
Yeah.
Doing some admin for Mummy up there.
I know.
I'm sure she is.
She's like keeping me sane.
Sure. And that's the thing, like it's always sad. It's never not going to be sad. It's never, but somehow you have been given graces to.
Yeah.
And do you see that?
Yeah. Because I don't think we'd be able to be functioning in the way that we are. Like, if there wasn't grace, I think we would have fallen apart a really long time ago, because it's not been an easy road. Like, there's lots of things that I've missed out on, and it's been hard. But there's joy in the suffering. There always is, and there's always good
like
in
you said,
suffering.
that quiet peace.
Yeah.
But also the great joy of having a daughter and knowing you have got her across the line. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing with us about Florence, because it's incredibly painful. But I'm sure it'll be really powerful for people to hear and encouraging. You know, people have got all sorts of challenges going on in life, and I think it's a reminder again. You know, you can see Annabel and Francis and the children at Mass and around the place and think, what a gorgeous life. And
it
you
looks
know,
quite simple from the outside, I think.
Yeah, and those like the crosses that we're each given, you know, are so, you know, I think I certainly look back and think they're so tailored to exactly what I need.
Yeah.
And the things that I find really hard, and that can be difficult at times. And I don't know if it's difficult for you at all, but just not be involved in like the justice, the economy of suffering and the justice that God must know, all the exact things that everyone has to.
And you sort of, it's happened time and
seen
time
and unseen
again,
sufferings.
when you're thinking, I'm sure there is a reason, but I don't know what it is, and I don't really understand what's going on here, and I would quite like some clarity, but I don't have it. So we'll just have to go with it and see where it leads. And then you get to the other side, and you're like, oh, okay, that's where it was leading. That makes sense now. It's not straightforward.
Yeah.
But that's not bad either.
Bah. Bah. Hey, sheepy bros. They're like dogs, bless them. We got them as a distraction, really. We were going to get some milking sheep when we first looked into it. But then soon after that, we got Joseph's diagnosis. So we knew we were going to be a bit like full on busy. So we traded down again, rather getting sheep for milk, which need to be milked all the time. You got 2 little male ones. So these are called wethers, which means they are castrated males. So they're just like way easier to look after. And they are chilled out little dudes. They're really fun. And they
do
headbutt
loads
each
of
other.
headbutting. Yeah, but they sort of don't do it like fighting. They like
Bah.
do it like as like a hello thing. Like they just do it for fun, like a hello sort of thing.
Is the plan to eat them?
I was keen to at first, but they're quite expensive sheep, so it'd be quite bad value. Quite bad value.
And they're
mutton
very
chops.
nice sheep.
And they've grown on us. I was quite keen. I was like, well, if we do move house to a smaller garden and we can't keep them, we should eat them out of principle. But then my father-in-law slightly undermined that by offering to keep them on his pasture. So it looks like their future is assured. I'd be happy to, in principle, but they're just quite nice and they've been so dear and darling. So we probably will just keep them on. But the chickens the chickens have not been named. The sheep have been named, which makes it a bit harder. As and when they stop
And
laying,
the chickens are unpleasant.
we should have a principle eat them, and they're just less endearing.
They fight each other and they're unpleasant. Like
yeah.
Once Daddy
Whereas the ducks?
shot a pigeon, and one of the chickens just attacked it and got claw and beak in and started whipping out feathers. Poor thing, and it
I had
wasn't
to
even
fight
dead.
the chicken off the wood pigeon. Yeah.
Yeah, and if
They're
they have,
savage.
if they've been living in one place for a long time, and then another chicken comes in, then they'll peck it to death.
Whereas
So they're
ducks are
not-
flipping epic.
Ducks
Look at
are
these
just
ducks.
so cute, and they have lovely eggs. They're the
Eggs are
best
good.
eggs. It's creamy, and it makes shop eggs and chicken eggs are plain and boring.
You okay, Henry?
But they're so lovely. They're like creamy and rich.
Creamier, richer, yummier.
It makes chicken creamy and rich.
Little barefoot tribal savage there.
The barefoot is a product of Brunei.
Yeah, so we were not generally barefoot before we went to Brunei, and then the children had 2 years living in the tropics in the
And then we were
rainforest.
just walking in the rainforest.
And they
barefoot.
just went barefoot for 2 years, and now we're in the rather less enjoyable climate of Britain.
But
the
in,
barefoot
but
thing
in
still
other
goes on.
seasons that isn't frosty cold winter like now, then we do go barefoot.
And my eldest son Felix here struggles sometimes to sit like a normal person.
I just
So-
sit like this.
So sitting down in the conventional form,
It's just much nicer.
So that
because
the
it
deep
keeps the body
squat.
heated.
which is fine, but also if you're sitting at the dinner table on your chair in that position, it is a bit eccentric. We forget how eccentric it is, and then people come over and we're like, yeah, we should probably act more normal if we can. I bought the trailer online for like 50 quid because the lights didn't work, so it wasn't selling for that much, and I didn't need the lights, so it was fine. So they're different colours because we've got 3 different chickens, and each chicken lays a different colour egg. So as far as I can tell, they taste the same. But the handy thing about having chickens that lay different colour eggs is you can tell which chicken is taking a break. So one of our chickens has taken the winter off, which is completely fine because we've frankly expected them all to take winter off. 2 of them are laying all the way through winter, which is great. But it means if one of them stops laying for like 9-10 months or something, we know it's kind of finished laying, and we could consider having a conversation with the children about thinning out that chicken and getting another layer instead. But it's all conversations to be had, whereas ducks lay all the way through the winter. What have you got? What are they? Oh, you found them down there. Then you can't eat those, but they're not poisonous. But they feel funny, don't they?
Yeah.
So then after your sweet, precious Florence...
We then got pregnant again. We wanted a baby because we wanted,
Yeah.
I wanted a baby I could take home. And
you did get that.
we did get that.
Just how specific you were in your prayer.
Wanted one that I could take home straight from the hospital, but that did not happen. So then we got pregnant with Joseph. So we thought we will go back to the UK and we will deal with it all then. So I'd not had any checks, like I've been taking vitamins and everything, but I'd not had any checks. And then we ended up moving during the 18th week of pregnancy, which was unnecessarily emotional.
Bad timing. Yeah.
That's unnecessarily emotional. Because international house moves are really complicated, it turns out. There's a lot
Brunei
so
to
we moved
here
from
then?
Brunei to here during the 18th week of pregnancy. So, same as when we lost Florence. So it was a bit nerve-wracking, that bit, and there was a lot to do and sort out and organise and shipping and freight and all of the stuff. But anyway, we got to the UK. Our house wasn't ready, so then we were sofa surfing with family, friends for about 3-4 weeks. During which time I had
children.
my first scan and everything looked okay. So, great, we were actually having a baby. I'm not just having a phantom pregnancy. Everything is great, amazing. We had about a week of being like, thank God we're back in the UK and this is happening. And then we got to Cambridge, had a scan like the next day and discovered that Joseph only has half a heart. So his left ventricle just hasn't grown. So he's got hyperplastic left heart syndrome. So his left ventricle isn't there. He's got various other complications with arteries and bits and pieces.
The half heart that's working,
The half that's working
blooming hard to make it all work.
connects to his lungs, not his body. So if it was left as it was, he would have lived for a few days and then his body would have given in. So we're grateful for the scan and the sonographer for picking it up, because otherwise we would have lost him very soon after birth. But they did pick it up, and then we were put immediately under Great Ormond Street's care, because it's a really complex heart condition. It's not like there are lots of heart conditions, but it's a really complicated one. The consultant there scanned us. We had a scan a couple of weeks later, and they scanned us, and then she came and talked to us about our options, because she said it's as severe as you can get without being fatal, terminal. We can operate, but it's going to be really rough. Do you want to go through with this or not, was the question. So that we were given 3 options. We were given termination, we were given palliative care once he's born, or go through the operation. Try it and see, because there's no guarantee that the operations will be a success. He was given, it's like 60% odds or something.
60% in
60% of getting through the first year. So like it's over half, but it's not massively over half.
Yeah.
So the question is, do we want to just let him die?
And I suppose they're letting you know where they're at. They don't know everything.
They don't
know. And then
know.
they put it to you.
Or do we want to try it? And we felt we've already let one child die. I don't really want to let another child die. I want to fight for him. And I want to give him the chance. And our thinking was, if he does die in theatre while he's having the operation, well then he'll have been loved up until he has the operation, and then he'll be asleep. So it'll be okay for him. And if he does die afterwards, then he'll have all of the best care that he can, and he'll be on morphine and he'll be on all of the drugs, and he'll be okay. So it's not like I'm putting him through suffering. I'm just choosing to give him a chance at having the good things too. So,
and in that, the child makes some choices. The doctors see these things, don't they? When the child makes those decisions for themselves, as in they're fighting for their life, and you see that.
He's fought the whole time. He's such a little fighter.
The most seriously ill but most healthiest looking baby when he was born.
Ridiculous child. So he was like the odds were stacked against him. He was born. We transferred to Great Ormond Street in one of those like submarine-looking ambulances with all of the portholes and the tubes and the pipes and the.
Panda. Was it the Panda team?
Yeah. They were fab. They were amazing. So we transferred to Great Ormond Street.
In something that looks like it could sustain life over sort of decades or something.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary little pod thing.
Yeah.
So we took him in. Children are born with a different sort of circulatory system, and it gradually switches. So at that point, he was fine because he was living off the same circulatory system as he'd had in utero. So he looked like a perfect little baby.
An amazing size and all those things. And born to term, wasn't he? Yeah.
Everything looked great. He looked perfect. And it was almost felt cruel keeping him in hospital, because you're like, what are we doing here? But they knew how weak he was, and they knew how quickly he would turn. So I wasn't allowed to breastfeed him at all. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I barely held him. I held him a bit, but it was very minimal. He had all the lines in. He had all of the probes and everything. He was being fed by IV because his stomach wasn't able to digest anything because it didn't have enough blood flow. So even then, he wasn't allowed anything. I was pumping, but I wasn't allowed to give him any of it. And then he, over the course of the next 10 days was the target for his operation, and he started off great, and then he just went downhill, and it got to day 9, and we moved up to the intensive care unit because he just wasn't coping, and it was suddenly really obvious that he really did need the operation. So like, okay, yeah, go. And we signed the piece of paper, and Francis handed him over to the surgeon, and we walked away. And it's the hardest thing, giving your child, just leaving them there. And they'd explained that they were going to lower his temperature to the point where his body stopped functioning normally, so that it wouldn't be too much of a shock for his internal system. So we put him on this cold mattress that was lowering his temperature. And having held one of your children who is dead and cold, and then giving another child to people who you just pray are, I mean, they were amazing.
Going to work in his best interest.
Absolutely amazing. Like, they were, I have only positive words for them, because they were just, the anaesthetist was the most extraordinary man. He came and talked to us the day before and took us through everything. It was very calm and very quiet, and he's like, I've got children, I understand, and he took us all through it, and we trusted them, absolutely, but then we
still do that
again
thing.
We were leaving the hospital without a baby, and he was there on so it was 6 hours, the first operation, and we went to mass at the oratory where we were married. So we were like, we need to go and pray. So we went there, and then by that time we went back again, and just waited. And finally Francis got the phone call, and he was out, and he was alive, but he'd had real complications coming out of the surgery. So they'd restarted his heart 4 times because it hadn't worked. Restarting his heart the first
and this operation was
hadn't
completely
worked.
rewiring his heart.
Yeah, so it was putting in a shunt, which then made it really fragile, but it was completely rewiring it so that the right hand side of the heart essentially was then pumping the blood to the rest of the body instead of the lungs.
Yeah.
It was really complicated. I can't explain it to you.
I think you might have shown me a picture of it once.
The diagram is insane.
Yeah.
So they're putting in the shunt as a sort of temporary measure before then doing a more permanent fix 4 months later. Except it can't be fixed, but like a more permanent solution. He was on the highest risk bed in the highest risk ward in the cardiac unit of Great Ormond Street Hospital. So it was not, like, it wasn't looking great. And they'd given him the best nurse, they'd given him everything, but they were really nervy. The crash bell went off that first day, and all of the doctors ran at us because they assumed it was him that was crashing, and it was actually another patient. But he did it. His heart did go into SVT again that night, but they managed to stabilise it. They tried a different drug and it stabilised it. So then he was over the immediate danger of the operation, but he was then they started trying to introduce milk into his system because he needed to learn how to digest things. But by that time, his stomach had started shutting down. So then he was really struggled with that. He got something called neck, and he got it pretty badly, not quite badly enough to need surgery, but it was really close. So then he was in ICU.
Oh, good girl. Daddy? Yeah. Will you take Flissy a little pace?
His stomach was shutting down basically and refusing to digest anything. So it took a long time and quite a lot of antibiotics and stuff to try and get that to the point where he was able to tolerate milk sufficiently that they took him out of ICU. And then I was allowed to sleep in the same room as him again, which was amazing. Oh. So then I'd not slept in the same room with him at all yet. So that was the first time that was possible. So, but I still couldn't pick him up or anything. Like we'd had some cuddles, but we'd had very little. I felt like
it's like a medical womb, isn't it? It's like plugged into all the tiny intricacies of the.
Like I had to be there because I had to understand what was going on, so that I could understand how to take care of him. But I wasn't doing anything for him, you know, like he was completely in his own space. So I felt like I couldn't even mother him. I couldn't mother any of the other children because I couldn't be at home. I couldn't do any of the things that my vocation demanded of me because I was just sitting in a chair looking at a bed like endlessly, hour for hour after hour after hour. And I couldn't, like, we decided I couldn't leave him. I didn't want to leave him because he was so fragile. But also that meant I couldn't be there for the other children. So it was a really difficult kind of...
It's really difficult.
I think it's the most difficult thing I've done, is knowing that they need me and not being there.
They need you more than ever. He needs you more than ever.
Yeah.
And then you and Francis have to make a decision, where should you
we
be?
do?
And that is, you know, when it comes to it, is what you have to do as your vocation. And that's just such a wrench.
Initially we thought we'd swap in and out, and that I would go home and he would come in, and we'd keep swapping around. But we found it was such a different world. The hospital world and the medical world and the home world were so radically different that it was really hard to move between them. And it was very unsettling for the children as well. So we decided, actually, you're just going to have your home world and you're going to do home things, and I'm going to have the hospital world, and then I'm going to know what's going on. Because if we kept swapping, we wouldn't have known what was, you know, everything changes.
Yeah.
And you need to keep up with it. So we decided we just separate the two. And I
You
felt,
and God again.
well, yeah, because I felt like all of the things that God had called me to do, that I loved doing, you know, being a wife and being a mother and home educating the children and being a housemaker, and all of the things that I so loved and felt like were my life's calling, I suddenly wasn't able to do any of them. And I was sort of feeling like, well, what's this for? Like, why am I...
How is this okay?
How is this what you're calling me to? Because it's not my calling. I've been living my calling and this isn't it. So like, what's going on? It sort of gradually dawned on me. It should have been much more obvious much earlier, but it gradually dawned on me that actually your vocation is to love God, not to do all of the busy stuff. So it gradually dawned on me that actually I was still doing my vocation so long as I was still praying, because that is actually your vocation, is your relationship with God, not that you can work that through your relationship with your children and your husband, but that's not the fullness of it. Like, first of all, it's God. So actually I need to sort out my priorities. And I'm not sure if I've managed to do that fully, but it was a real eye-opener that that's really what I'm supposed to be doing with my life.
And then were you there at the hospital when you had this sort of realisation? Were you at home? Was it afterwards? Did you go through all of that period?
Because
so then how did things change?
We were there for months because it took him a long time to get to the point where he was able to digest enough milk that they'd let us come home.
It's almost like I felt Felicity was in just for a little bit, a week actually, in intensive care. But even then, you sort of feel like some level they're kind of they are yours, but they're kind of not yours. Someone else is doing what they need to do, and you're just kind of observing. And that's why, you know, when you get to sleep in their room, you feel like, wow, what privilege.
Like a month in, I dared to pick him up. I was allowed to pick him up by this point. He didn't have very many wires. And the main one that they were monitoring was his SATs, but I knew they were stable and I knew he was okay. So I picked him up and I disconnected it and I took him to my bed and I shut the curtain. And it was the same room, like it was just a curtain, but it just felt like the most extraordinary thing. Like I'm holding him and it's just us, like for the first time, like a month in. And it was just such a bizarre way. It's such a like transient space. There's no, it's a weird way to live. And I just held him and it's like, he's here. And then we got to the point where I could move the stand with his stuff on with him, so we could walk around together, which was really nice. So I could take him on little trips out around the ward rather than just in his little room. But yeah, it took a really long time to get to the point where they were then happy for him to move to Addenbrooke's. So we were still living in hospital, but it was the local hospital instead of Great Ormond Street. And then we were there for about a week and a half, and eventually we were allowed home. And then we were home for about a day and a half, and then we went back in because he wasn't coping. So I had to go back again, and that was just the worst of the worst. It's the worst of the worst, because he's like finally home, and then we went back again for another week. But no, he's been home for a long time now. So like we're in and out still, and he still gets sick. He's got his feeding tube, he's on a pump because if you give him the liquid too fast, his stomach can't cope with it, so he's got to have it at a certain pace. So it's still very carefully controlled. Between the first and the second operation, he had a second operation when he was about 4 months old. It was very, very delicate. He had to be fed every 3 hours exactly, so that the fluid balance remained exactly correct within his body. So that was 24/7, every 3 hours for an hour over the pump. I was pumping as well to give him the milk. It was a really intense 4 months. And he's pretty robust now, all things considered.
And so your obviously husband, Francis, was an incredible...
absolute star. So he was working full time and keeping all of the children home educating and keeping everything going at home. Like we had an au pair for that little bit of time as well, because we were like, this is too much. So we had an au pair for 6 months for that time, but he was running it all. So he did it all. The army did give him some time off, which was really helpful. But he was working full time for a lot of it. We'd home educated up until that point, but then we put them in RCA in Regina Coeli, which is a different sort of home educating. So then they were in the academy for 2 days a week, and and doing the homework for that the other 3 days a week. So that was some structure for them, and some continuity where they wouldn't have had otherwise. Because I usually take the lead on home educating stuff.
And then community, church community?
Church community was absolutely inspirational. I've never known anything like it. So like, obviously we moved in as we got Joseph's diagnosis, and then I was a bit out of it from that point forward, I think, because I was really like taking a lot of processing time in my brain and not necessarily being the most friendly of friends. But everyone rallied around us absolutely incredibly. The community was wonderful, and they kept Francis going. Like, I think the church community fed Francis and the children for about a month and a half, 2 months. People dropped off meals every day, and so he was keeping the house going, but didn't have to cook because everyone was giving them the most incredible food. Everyone was praying for us, and the graces and the prayers, like the number of times that child nearly died, and it was miraculous that he didn't. And it's so many people were praying for him. It was just beautiful. It was amazing.
Now you've had now you've had a good dose of
suffering.
Turn, good few turns. Do you have any thoughts on, like, you're a deep thinker, and so's Francis, and ponderings on, reparation for the past, for, offering up an intention for the future, or any thoughts on suffering that you've come to realise? I mean, you've certainly realised that our Lord, it's about our relationship with God, and that is the number one thing.
That is the number one thing. Quite early in our marriage, that we did quite early in our marriage was a total consecration to Our Lady. Yes. So that has been like the backstop the whole way through, because whatever happens, we've already given it to her and she can use it. So she can use it as prayer. So I think so long as whatever you're doing can convert into prayer, it can be sanctifying, and it can sanctify the world. Even if it doesn't sanctify you, it can sanctify the world. Whatever it is that's happening, whether it's good or bad, or joy or suffering, or whatever it is, Our Lady can take it and she can use it. And that's a really powerful, beautiful thing. Yeah.
That is amazing, Annabel. I will second the consecration. Thank you so much, Annabel. It's been really insightful. It's been really emotional.
Thank you.
And there's a lot to think about there. And there's a lot of perspective to be gained. And thank you really for, being very generous with your story and unearthing lots of things. God bless you, Annabel.
Thank you very much.